This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The streets of Gaza are relatively calm in the aftermath of the ceasefire agreement that has been reached between Hamas and Fatah. Despite reports of sporadic confrontation erupting in various parts of Gaza, the two Palestinian factions announced that they remain committed to the ceasefire agreement, confirming that they will seek to implement it fully on the ground.
The
streets of Gaza witnessed relative calm in the aftermath of the ceasefire agreement, which has been reached between Fatah and Hamas in an attempt to contain the bloody violence and street confrontations. To demonstrate that their intentions are serious, Palestinian factions started today to monitor the implementation of the ceasefire agreement.
I
believe that Fatah and the rest of Palestinian factions in the next few hours will follow up on the situation to make sure that the agreement is being implemented on the ground. Fatah and Hamas have shown a great deal of confidence and commitment, vowing to implement the agreement and help end street violence, a violence that has been causing a lot of pain and suffering to the Palestinian people, especially during the past few days.
Despite reports of street confrontations and exchange of gunfire between Hamas and Fatah, both factions confirmed that they remain committed to the ceasefire agreement, stressing that they will overcome all obstacles for the sake of the Palestinian people.
We signed
the ceasefire agreement under difficult circumstances. We maintained self-control and called for restraint despite the fact that Lieutenant Adnan Ruhma was martyred. We honor this agreement and we will seek to implement it on the ground.
This is what we have agreed on with the Palestinian factions. We will exert efforts to reach a unified and a responsible national consensus with follow-up committees representing all Palestinian factions. We will work in conjunction with all factions to de-escalate the crisis and restore security and order in the streets.
Amidst cautious optimism, Palestinians expect that the ceasefire agreement will hold, hoping that it will help end the internal fighting that has long been haunting them.
The agreement itself is meaningless if it is not followed up by serious effort to implement it on the ground. It is not important to sit on the bargaining table and just sip coffee and drink Coke. We must implement on the ground what we have agreed upon. In addition, we must convince our people in the streets to respect and honor this agreement because all Palestinians will benefit from it.
The agreement reached between the Palestinian factions may prevent further deterioration of the security situation. However, Palestinians are still facing many challenges and obstacles on the political front while opposing the occupation.
Jazeera, Gaza, Palestine.
A booby-trapped car exploded near the entrance of a wholesale vegetable market in southern Baghdad, killing 5 people and injuring 19 others. One employee of Iraq's Ministry of Electricity was killed and 2 others were injured in an explosion east of the capital, Baghdad. A security source said that a roadside bomb was planted inside a car that was being used by the employees. It exploded only a few meters away from the ministry building in the Talibiyah area.
استؤنفت في العاصمة العراقية بغداد محاكمة الرئيس العراقي الأسبق صدام حسين وعدد من مسؤولي نظامه في
In the capital of Baghdad, the trial resumed of the former Iraqi President Saddam Hussein and members of his former cabinet in the case of mass extermination of the Kurds, or what is known as the Anfal case. The representatives of the accused in the trial are scheduled to listen to documented evidence in the case. During the trial, the prosecutor general presented documents showing that orders were given to use chemical weapons. Saddam has already been sentenced to death in a separate case, the TruceAl case, for issuing orders to execute nearly 150 Iraqis from the village of TruceAl in 1982.
من بلدة الدجيل عام 82.
The Associated Press reported that the former Minister of Electricity, Ayham al-Samara'i, has escaped from a jail in Baghdad. Al-Samara'i, who holds an American citizenship, served as electricity minister during the term of former Prime Minister Iyad al-Allawi. He had been arrested earlier for being involved in a financial scandal.
The targeting of athletes in Iraq has worried many amateur and professional athletes. Despite all this, Iraqi athletes are determined to continue their path. Abdurrahim brought us this report.
بما أن الرياضة جزء من المجتمع، فإن ظلال ما يجري على الساحة العراقية سيكون عليها أيضاً.
Sports are part of society, so whatever happens in Iraq will also affect sports. Many Iraqi athletes were killed on different occasions. This time, the name Ahmed Hussein Khurshid, a soccer player from Al-Qazimiya team, joined the list of martyr athletes. Ahmed was martyred in an area of Baghdad that was controlled by a terrorist group after he had a fight with them. Ahmed Hussein Khurshid, also known as Siyam, was born in 1982. He is the son of a family with 11 other members. He did not finish middle school because he became involved in soccer. He dreamed of becoming a star in the sky of Iraqi sports. His dream came true, but in another way and at another time, different from what he had dreamed. His soccer career began with a popular team in the Kasara area. He was then relocated to the Qazimiya team, where he played for 2 years. It was anticipated that this player was going to play in the Karbala club, but his fate was stronger than his dream.
نادي الكهرباء، لكن مشيئة القدر كانت أقوى من كل الآمال.
قدم شهداء كثير الرياضة بالعراق، وأكثر شيء يستهدفون الرياضيين.
This sport has many martyrs. They target the athletes the most. Sports have nothing to do with politics. Brother Siyam was the most qualified and ethical player. There are very few players with his manners, commitment, and dedication to training. He was one of the many players on the Qazimiya team.
من اللاعبين الأساسيين في نادي الكاظمية.
برنامجنا اليومي الرحيل التمرين إلى نادي الكاظمية.
He used to train daily with the Qazimiya team. This was part of his daily routine. The news of his death was a shock. This is unfair. He did not deserve this.
ما ينصف بالنسبة لي.
Ahmed's mother, when we met her, remained strong and was convinced that God's will is stronger than anything else.
His whole life was about soccer. He used to come, eat and drink, change his clothes, take his soccer ball and leave. This was his life. He had no enemies. Everybody loved him. All these women are like my sisters, and they've helped raise him. My son did not do anything wrong. He was killed unjustly. He did nothing wrong.
Dreams and hopes drive humans towards innovation, but sometimes things do not go as people wish. Everything is in God's hands. Siyam was not an ordinary person. It seems that the people who loved Siyam, which means fasting, will have to fast from seeing him. Despite all this, everyone knows that sports will always remain in Iraq. From Baghdad, Taha Abdurrahim, Al-Iraqiya Television.
قناة العراقية.
Al-Mahdi Army, which is affiliated with the Sadr group led by the Shiite leader Muqtada al-Sadr, has organized several groups of young men, many of whom are morally bankrupt and are drug users.
التي جرت للدوائر والمستشفيات والمتاحف وغيرها بعد دخول القوات الأمريكية.
In the aftermath of the US-led invasion in Iraq, many Al-Mahdi fighters have taken part in armed burglaries that targeted public institutions such as hospitals, museums, and many others. Al-Mahdi Army started an aggressive anti-Sunni campaign attacking people and storming mosques and public institutions. In addition, it formed death squads throughout Iraq to assassinate Sunni leaders and residents. Some of the areas where it has been active include but not limited to Al-Zawraa, Al-Shulla, Al-Sha'ab, Ur neighborhood, Al-Husayniyya, Jamila, Talibiyya, Baladiyat, Baghdad Al-Jadida, and others. Publicly, Al-Mahdi Army claims that it does not discriminate between Sunnis and Shiites, saying that all Iraqis are brothers under God. In 2004, Al-Mahdi Army seized control of the city of Najaf, where many residents were subjected to intimidation and torture. It established a martial court in Najaf, where many local residents opposing its views were executed, and their bodies were dumped in the Imam Ali bin Abi Talib shrine. Soon afterwards, the US-led forces in Iraq launched a wide-scale attack on Al-Mahdi Army and its supporters in Najaf. After a brief confrontation, Al-Mahdi Army was defeated, forcing its leader Muqtada al-Sadr to disassemble it. Tragically, Muqtada al-Sadr started to sell the army's weapons to the occupation forces. While the world was watching, members of Al-Mahdi Army stood in long lines to sell their weapons, which include rifles, mortars, and bombs to the US forces for despicable prices. Amidst his defeat, Muqtada al-Sadr announced that he decided to join the political process and his army will no longer engage in military operations against the US-led forces in Iraq. Moreover, al-Sadr joined Iraq's national unity government and took part in the drafting of its constitution. Meanwhile, Al-Mahdi death squads continued to attack Iraqi Sunnis, targeting and killing their leaders and attacking their holy shrines. It seems that the army has changed its slogan from "Let's get rid of the occupiers" to "Let's get rid of the Sunnis." Indeed, al-Sadr has publicly declared a war on Iraqi Sunnis and their mosques after the Samarra bomb attacks.
في كتاب التاريخ صفحات دونت في أسطورها أحداثاً ووقائع غيرت وجه الحياة.
Mauritania has gone through many stages that changed the course of its history. The impossible has become possible and dreams have turned to reality. Muawiyah Weld Ahmed Tai, the former president of Mauritania, seized power in a military coup d'etat on December 12, 1984.
في 12 من ديسمبر من عام 1984 تزعم العقيد معاوية ولد سيدي أحمد الطايع انقلابا عسكريا
Mauritania's former president, Colonel Muawiyah Weld Sidi Ahmed Tai, carried out a military coup d'etat, overthrowing his predecessor, Mohammed Quna Weld Hadala. In fact, Muawiyah took part in another military coup d'etat that toppled the regime of Mukhtar Weld Dada in 1978. Muawiyah, who was the longest ruling president in Mauritania, remained in power for nearly 21 years until he was toppled in a peaceful coup d'etat by Colonel Ali Weld Mohammed Fall on August 3, 2005. In November 2005, the Islamic Republic of Mauritania embarked on a new journey towards democracy. The country held its first free legislative and local government elections, where 17 women were sworn in as the new members of parliament. Mauritania will complete the democratic process by holding presidential elections in March 2007.
وسوف تكتمل خطوات الانتقال الديمقراطي في موريتانيا بإجراء انتخابات رئاسية في شهر مارس من العام المقبل 2007.
Former U.S. President Jimmy Carter has created a storm of controversy with his new book titled Palestine, Peace, Not Apartheid. Critics say the book is filled with factual inaccuracies and blatant one-sidedness. Israel Television's Yaron Dekel spoke with Carter about the book, as we hear in this report from IBA's Viva Press.
It has a connotation to the repulsive regime in South Africa. Why did you decide to use such a word?
I think that the persecution of the Palestinians in their own land and the separation, forced separation of them from Israeli settlers, and the requirement that they have passes, and the taking away from them of their land by occupation, then by confiscation, then by colonization, and the building of a wall to separate the two, all have the same connotations as apartheid in South Africa. And I want it to be, I think, both accurate and, I have to admit, provocative.
Do you ignore almost ignore the Arab terrorism?
No, I don't. I deplore terrorism and violence very repeatedly in the book.
But only Israel is responsible for the lack of political process, not the Palestinians.
I believe that to be true, yes.
But you know, the narrative of Israel is completely different. Israel has tried, in several occasions, to exchange land for peace. And what the Israelis got instead was terrorism, rockets, and kidnapping, which were all launched from the returned territory.
I think you can make the argument both ways. Israel has offered to exchange some of the Palestinian territory for peace. And the only time they've exchanged territory for peace was in Gaza. And I wrote a whole chapter about the circumstances in Gaza. And they encapsulated or imprisoned the Gaza people within a wall with only 2 openings in it and closed the openings most of the time.
But then the question, Mr. President, is do you criticize Israel of being there, and you criticize Israel of getting out of there? And this is a paradox.
No, I think Israel did well to withdraw from Gaza. And I wish they had stayed out of Gaza, and I hope in the future they will stay out of Gaza, which, as you know, is just 1% of the territory in the so-called Holy Land.
In his book, Carter also writes about the security fence, calling it a separation wall as opposed to a defense barrier.
Are you aware, Mr. President, that this barrier saved the lives of many, many innocent Israelis?
I don't deny that it may have. The barrier wall, though, is primarily designed now to take Palestinian land and to increase the amount of land that the Israelis have from the Palestinians. And nowhere in the length of that wall, which is about 3 times as long as a border between Israel and the West Bank, is there any separation of Palestinian land from Israeli land. It's all on Palestine. So it separates Palestinian land from Palestinian land.
But it also prevents suicide bombers to get into Israeli cities.
It might prevent attacks on foot, yes, because the Palestinians can't penetrate the wall. But, you know, I can throw even the wall that's now being built, say, between Jerusalem and Ramallah or Jericho. I've seen that wall being built. It's 40 feet high, as high as a 4-story building. I can throw a baseball over it. Still. I'm 82 years old. I can still throw a baseball over it. And obviously rockets and mortars can go over the wall. So it's not designed to prevent attacks on Israel lately. It's designed to take land.
Asked if he thinks the creation of the State of Israel was a mistake, Carter said,
"No, I think it was a very wonderful thing to do. I was ecstatic when it happened. I was a submarine officer then. My commanding officer was Harry Truman, who immediately recognized Israel. And I think if you would be objective about it, to the last 30 years of my life, my most important single goal in dealing with international affairs has been to bring peace to Israel and peace to Israel's neighbors, and to have Israel living in harmony with them."
President Carter, thank you very much for taking the time and talking to the Israeli television.
I've enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
وفي
The Syrians are commemorating the 25th anniversary of the regrettable Israeli decision to annex the Golan Heights. Despite the long period of occupation, Golan's residents' dreams are attached to their homeland, and they refuse to let the memories die. They hope that they will be able to forget the bitter memory of the day when the occupation started, and they dream of the day when they will be able to return home. Our reporter, Shuruk Assad, from Majda al-Shams in Syria's occupied Golan Heights.
The Israeli attempts to Judify the occupied Syrian Golan Heights have not stopped, and the soil of the land and the hearts of its residents have not changed. This beautiful home belongs to Majid and Abu Majid. Its trees continue to carry the scent of the nation. Its stones remain the same and continue to relay history and identity. The residents of this home have not changed. They still dream of returning one day. The first thing that catches one's eye is the beautiful Syrian flag and pictures of educated men and revolutionaries, as well as the national document which rejected the annexation of the Golan Heights and the Israeli citizenship. Abu Majid wrote this document and held a sit-in along with other protesters. Supporting him was Majid and naturally all the residents of the occupied Golan.
At the beginning of the occupation, the resistance against the occupation was underground. There was a secret resistance, but today it's the opposite. The confrontation against the occupation is an open one with a loud and strong voice. It is a peaceful confrontation, but it is an absolute rejection of all of the occupation's measures. The local councils rejected aligning with the occupation.
We drank the mette herbal drink in a hospitable home. Majid could not stop talking about her longing for her nation.
With all its good and bad aspects, I love my homeland and want to return. I want to say something that might be said by a little girl, not someone of my age. But sometimes I feel like I want to run through the small streets, the country streets, the streets of Damascus. I want to go into the stores, talk with the people and buy things and talk to them. I want to go to Qasyun Mountain.
In their hearts, their dreams are renewed. On the stones, it is written, "If a nation desires liberty, then fate must grant it." This is what was written on the statue of Syrian revolutionaries who fought the French colonization. Shuruk Assad, Dubai TV, from Majda al-Shams.
The UN Security Council will assess today the report on the investigation into the killing of former Premier Rafi al-Hariri conducted by prosecutor Serge Bramertz. Diplomatic sources in New York said that Bramertz would give an overview of the results of his findings before the Council. Then the session will be held in secret and will be run by the Qatari delegate. Sources said that the Council would not issue any decisions at the end of the session, but only a press release. Arab League chief Amr Mussa will return to Beirut on Tuesday to resume his efforts to broker a deal between the Lebanese government and its opposition. Speaking to AFP from Cairo after a trip to Riyadh, Mussa said he also planned to visit Damascus soon, with a firm date to be set after Syrian President Bashar al-Assad returns from a trip to Moscow, which starts today. Mussa, who was in Saudi Arabia yesterday, seemed to have won Riyadh's support for his efforts to end the Lebanese political standoff.
Arab League chief Amr Mussa said Sunday that he would return to Beirut on Tuesday to resume his efforts to broker a deal between the Lebanese government and its opposition. Mussa told AFP that after Beirut, he would be visiting Damascus as soon as Syrian President Bashar al-Assad returns from Moscow. Mussa said that in Riyadh, he briefed Saudi King Abdullah on efforts to resolve the Lebanese crisis and to bring about an agreement between the government and opposition. The monarch expressed full support for the mission, adding that Saudi Arabia will attempt to ensure the success of the Arab League's initiative in Lebanon. Mussa said that his talks with King Abdullah, attended by Saudi Crown Prince Sultan bin Abdulaziz and Foreign Minister Prince Saud al-Faisal, also covered Iraq, the Palestinian territories and Darfur. Mussa left Beirut last Thursday after trying to broker an agreement between the government of Senura and the Hezbollah-led opposition. Lebanese newspapers said Mussa secured a holiday truce during his mediation trip, which they described as a half-success after weeks of political feuding that triggered round-the-clock opposition protests in central Beirut.
Syrian President Bashar al-Assad heads today for Moscow with the Lebanon, Iraq and Palestinian crisis on the agenda. Assad and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin will examine means to resolve the crisis in a visit focused more on politics than economic ties. The three-day mission comes hot on the heels of a Moscow visit by Prime Minister Fouad al-Sanyura. Assad and Putin were to discuss a UN plan to set up an international tribunal to try suspects in the February 2005 assassination of former Premier Rafi al-Hariri. Before going to Moscow, Assad was in Abu Dhabi, where he held talks with his Emirati counterpart, Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Prime Minister Fouad al-Sanyura received this morning at the Grand Sarai Congressman John Kerry and Christopher Dood. In the meeting, which lasted 1.5 hours, the Prime Minister informed his visitors about the developments in Lebanon and the region and the work of the government in handling the present political and economic crisis. He also informed them about the preparations for the Paris III donor conference. British Prime Minister Tony Blair arrived in Ramallah today for talks with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. The pair will discuss the current situation in the Palestinian territories and relations with Israel. Blair, who is on a peace mission to the region, was greeted by military guard of honors as he arrived at Abbas's presidential compound in the West Bank town of Ramallah. Blair was also due to meet Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert later today. Blair has backed Abbas's call for new elections in a bid to break the stalemate between the Hamas-led cabinet and Fatah, a deadlock that has degenerated into worsening street violence between the rival groups. Blair flew into Tel Aviv after making an unannounced visit to British troops in Iraq.
Bahrain's King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa has dismissed claims that Iran poses a threat to the Persian Gulf littoral states. He told a press conference in the Bahraini capital of Manama that Iran has friendly relations with the countries in the Mideast and underlined there is no indication whatsoever that Tehran is a threat. The Bahraini ruler reaffirmed that Iran's nuclear program is peaceful and added the member nations of the Persian Gulf Cooperation Council too are seeking to develop peaceful atomic know-how. He underscored Iran is after peace and works closely with its neighbors to help smooth out the problems facing the region. The UN report released on Monday revealed that Europe's Muslims face deep-seated discrimination in education, housing and jobs that can alienate them from the mainstream. Presenting dozens of polls and case studies in various EU nations, the 15-page report said many Muslims struggled with myriad barriers to social advancement, giving rise to feelings of hopelessness and exclusion. The report says available data shows that European Muslims are often disproportionately represented in areas with poorer housing conditions, while their educational achievement falls below average, and their unemployment rates are higher than average. It also adds Muslim women who wear headscarves have the hardest job getting jobs.
The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. Please visit linktv.org/Mosaic for more information about these broadcasters or to view previous Mosaic programs, obtain program transcripts, or receive the weekly Mosaic Intelligence Report. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Feyerdahl Foundation, the Otto Haas Charitable Trust, and by committed Link TV viewers like you. If you value this program, please send your tax-deductible contribution to Link TV, either through the website or the mailing address listed on your screen. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs which connect you to the world.